So I just completed the Headspace Pro Level 1 course. I took my time with that course, and I just, whenever I felt like it, I kind of returned to it. I didn't do it all in one day, and I didn't do it all in a consecutive set of days. And here's my review. And again, this is from somebody that is not a big fan of Headspace and thinks that Headspace is basically watering down the practice of meditation. So the teacher for this course was one Andy Puttycombe. I guess he's the co-founder of Headspace, and I liked it. I liked him and his approach, and he seemed like a very genuine teacher in this app. So it seems like people here are in decent hands, at least in terms of the one of the people that are in charge around here, around the app. So the Headspace Level 1 course, it was 10 classes, 10 meditation sessions. And I would say that most of these classes are pretty basic. So if you're telling me that the Pro Level 1 course is what I just did, those 10 sessions, if that's the pro aspect of Headspace, then what's the non-pro aspect? So I look, obviously, I looked through it before I chose the course to do, and all of the other ones are kind of, how can I say it, not not pointed towards what I think is the real point of meditation. They're all geared towards making me or you or whoever is using the app feel better in the moment. Maybe making us more productive, less anxious, more compassionate, more loving, less angry, sleeping better, exercising more. All these positive things that we may or may not want to do for the monkey, to take care of the monkey and to just feel better in our daily lives in this difficult and modern, complex world. So there's a bunch of those classes there, but none of those are real meditation, in my humble opinion, because none of those are pointing or even attempting to point at our true nature. If you're not pointing at our true nature, if you're not trying to discover your own mind and what it means to be a mind, then what's the point of meditation? So it seemed like, and it seems now to me like the pro course is that course. So the pro course here in Headspace would be the intro level course in any other decent meditation app. And I use decent very liberally because I think Headspace is a decent app. It's a pretty good app. It's a pretty cool app on many levels, both from a technical perspective and from a content perspective. It's okay for us to be trying to feel better. That's fine. That's not that big of a deal. It's just we're missing the point here. You're focused on feeling better up here in terms of the monkey mind, just being less anxious, being more productive. You're focused on all these like positive outcomes. That's fine. But you're not focused, it seems, with Headspace on discovering your true nature. And that's the point of meditation. And once you do that, everything else kind of seems irrelevant and meaningless relative to that amazing, profound goal. Even though it's not supposed to be a goal, it is kind of a goal, right? And so Headspace is lacking. Basically, the majority, 95% of what you have in Headspace, in my humble opinion, is just feel good stuff, not junk. Potentially useful and potentially incredibly useful if somebody's anxious and this is making them less anxious, or if somebody's not able to sleep and this lets them have more sleep. Think about how powerful that is. That's such a powerful thing. What a powerful tool. But in my worldview, in my idea of meditation, those things are not relevant. Those things are just fluff. The whole point of meditation to me is to discover your true nature, to discover your mind. And the Pro Level 1 course attempts at being the first step at doing that. So again, in any other course, this would be the first course. This would be intro to meditation. But here in Headspace, it's the pro course, which does not, for me, doesn't, it's not a good image. If your pro course is literally the most basic instruction about how to sit in silence. And that's what the Pro Level 1 course on Headspace is. It is simply Andy, in his pleasant voice, his calming voice, trying to get me, as I'm listening to him, to be in silence, to be comfortable sitting in silence, to not be so anxious sitting in silence, because probably a lot of people can't sit in silence. They don't know what it means to just sit calmly, close their eyes, and just to be silent. And then that could go, quite a bit deeper. What does that mean to be silent? Is this silent when I just close my eyes and sit? Is that silent? Even if my mind is running, running and running and running and running, and I'm just thinking, is that silence? I'm not sure. I don't think that's the kind of silence we're after when we meditate, is it? It's a different kind of silence. But that's not what this intro course or the Pro Level 1 course tries to do. It's not the kind of silence that um, is without thought, where you are everything and nothing at the same time, and where you're no longer deeply identifying with your body, and you kind of have a different perception of the world and reality, a grander, broader perception, where you no longer see yourself as just this monkey. That kind of silence, that's the kind of silence you want to sit in and observe and rest in. But before you get to that silence, you need to just be able to shut the fuck up, sit down, close your eyes, and sit for 10 minutes without having a panic attack, or without jumping up out of your seat and doing a bunch of other things, or checking your app, or doing this or that, or all the other bullshit that you could do. None of those things are needed. You just need to be calm and sit quietly for a second. And that's what Andy is trying to get you to do in this Pro Level 1 course, or as I like to put it, the Headspace Intro course, Intro to Meditation. So it's a very worthwhile thing to tell us to sit in silence. It's a very worthwhile thing. And it's of the more basic silence variety that Andy's attempting to get us to sit in. It's the very first step to be able to sit down calmly and to not be fidgety, not be overly anxious, not be overly thinking too much, not have all the monkey mind stuff going on. That's the first step. Most people have trouble with that. Most people, when they meditate, they sit with their eyes closed, but there's so much going on underneath. And um, and it could sometimes be scary. I could see why it could be scary to be silent for some people, and so it's a good first step. It's a key first step, but it's not even a step two. It's just a step one. This course, and if you're a Headspace user, I suggest you move on to these pro courses. You don't need to be doing any of these basic courses to do the pro. They're two different worlds. It's not that you have this intro, all these intro courses, all these other like topic based courses where you're studying, okay, not studying, where you're like meditating to decrease your anxiety, or you're meditating to be more compassionate to your loved ones, or you're meditating to be less angry. It's not, you don't need to do those to jump to the pro course. That's a different bucket. That's a completely different bucket. That's something else. And then something else is this pro course. That's like saying, it's like saying, hey, you really need to do weight training before you start stretching. That doesn't make any sense. Weight training is one thing, it's to increase your muscles, and stretching is a completely different thing, to do other things for your body. In the same sense, doing meditation practices that are only focused on, for example, decreasing your anger and doing all the kind of visualizations and all the kind of stuff that you may do to decrease your anger, that's one thing. And doing meditations to discover your mind and your true nature, it's a completely different thing in its essence. And so if you're gonna be meditating and talking about anger or anxiety or love and compassion, procrastination, fear, all the stuff, self-worth, all that stuff is there. You could be doing all those things, you could be doing it for years and years, but if you don't have any instruction, any instruction telling you to just be quiet for a second and to just observe your mind and to ask, who is the one that is observing? Where is that one? If you never ask that, you never think about that, maybe on your own 5 years, 10 years down the road, you'll kind of have that realization, you'll have an epiphany. And that's what a lot of the old school meditation practices, which I also don't necessarily agree with, the old school approaches that are so indirect and so roundabout that it's basically the same thing as all this headspace nonsense, where you have uh, ancient meditation practices that are still, that are still being taught today, that are just so indirect, so indirect that it's the same thing as all this headspace fluff. You need to be a little bit more direct. You just need to be a little bit more direct. Not every monkey has to discover it for themselves by sitting for decades and decades and decades, and finally they get a realization. That doesn't have to happen. It could be much cleaner and clearer than that. One way it could be clearer is by doing psychedelics. When somebody does psychedelics, they get a bunch of insight that also is obtained after doing decades of meditation. You get that right away, and you can kind of, it's like taking a plane or a helicopter to the mountaintop. You see the entire path, and then we bring you back down. And now you know, okay, that's where I have to go. It gives you a different vibe, it gives you a different approach, having been up there for a second. Otherwise, it's almost dependent on luck, in my opinion, where you have sometimes monks meditating for decades, and only at a certain point do they get quote unquote enlightened. But somebody could just take psychedelics a few times, start a meditation practice, and kind of, in terms of the enlightenment, maybe not in the discipline, but in terms of the enlightenment, they can kind of be there much quicker. And it's kind of sad. It's kind of tragic. Why not get there a little bit faster? I'm not saying one needs to get there as fast as possible. That's not a good idea either. But a little bit of direction would be useful, even though it doesn't make any sense. Even though I admit direction is useless, completely useless, but at the same time it's useful too. That's just how it is. You have to be comfortable with that. And if you're not comfortable with that, that means there's something in your mind that is still fetishizing certain approaches and certain ways of thinking that are not really correlated well to reality. You're loving the story. You're fetishizing certain stories that you've created in your mind. But let me take a step back here and get back to the Headspace thing. So I've already said it's a pretty good app from a technical perspective. It's a cool app. I like the app. It's a good looking app, and you have a bunch of tools there. That's awesome. I love it. I love knowing that I can open the app, and if I want to go to sleep, there's something there for me. That if I'm angry, there could be something there for me. That if I'm really depressed, there could be something there for me to help me out right now in the moment. But I also like being on a path that's real and that's truly improving my mind and helping me understand who I really am. And most of Headspace just won't do that for you. Now, the Pro Level 1 course will do that for you, but it's the tiniest intro. It's 10 sessions of meditation that are with the only goal of just making you sit in silence. Just the most basic thing. Now, compare that to something like the Waking Up app by Sam Harris. In his intro course, where he has 28 sessions now, before he had 50, and he cut it down to 28, which I don't agree with. I think that's crazy. Even 50 sessions is not enough for an intro course. But those 28 sessions, probably the third, fourth session, you're already in deeper than the Pro Level 1 course could do for you. And by the 28th session, you probably, I mean, if by the 28th session you've had some realizations and some ego dissolution, that's wild. For me, it took and takes much longer to do anything like that. But by the 28th session, you're going to have a pretty decent map of where Sam is going to be leading you on, and you're going to be far more understanding and aware of the goal of meditation, even though there is no goal of meditation. So I like the Sam Harris app more, and I like that approach more. It's just a different approach. It's basically taking whatever the pro courses on Headspace are and expanding it and making that the true purpose, and saying, if that's the true purpose, what kind of content do we want? Do we want to be talking about anger? Do we want to be talking about loneliness? Do we want to be talking about fear? Do we want to be talking about stress? Or do we want to be talking about what it feels like to be you? How can you pay more attention to that? How can you be more mindful of that? That's kind of what we want to talk about, right? if we're trying to understand our true nature, if we're trying to understand our true mind. And so the Headspace course, I would recommend it for people that are already in Headspace. If you're in it already, yeah, you could take it, dabble in it. But if you're not in the Headspace ecosystem yet, it just leaves too much to be desired for me. It just leaves way too much to be desired.